Shalom, and welcome back to B'nai Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe if you haven't done so yet, and most importantly, to share this wisdom and inspiration with friends and family. When you look into the book of Leviticus, chapter 19, verse 14, Lo tikalel cheresh, literally translated, do not curse or insult the deaf. Then the verse continues, Velifnei iver lo titen michshol, or place a stumbling block before the blind. Ve'areta melakecha ani Hashem, and you shall fear your God. I am Hashem, I am your God. Question, is this telling us that if somebody's not deaf, you are allowed to curse them? Moreover, is the Torah speaking to such a decrepit, degraded person that would have the audacity to make fun of a deaf person? Now let's go to the blind. Is the Torah speaking to an evil psychopath who's capable of tripping the blind? I mean, what discussion can you have with a person like that to give him commandments not to do so? I mean, it's so obvious. It's just so cruel to do that. It's so inhumane. And what's this thing about you should fear your God? I mean, every time there is a negative commandment, it's about fearing God. You don't do it because you fear God. You believe that God is the king of the universe, accept his sovereignty, you're subservient to his will, and you don't do what he doesn't want you to do. What is going on here? So let's explain it. The sages tell us that when it says you shouldn't curse a deaf person, that doesn't mean literally deaf person. It means even someone who cannot hear you. Sometimes in our minds, we justify perhaps insulting someone else or cursing someone else, literally, when they can't hear us. And we figure, what harm have we done? They can't hear us anyway. They're not really getting hurt by our words because they're far away. And the Torah tells us no. Even if someone is, quote, deaf, they can't hear you, you're not allowed to curse them. In other words, even though there's no direct harm, or there seems not to be direct harm, you're not allowed to do it. Think about today's day and age. Think about how many times people post things anonymously, so to speak, and the damage that it can bring, the hurt that it can bring on someone else's life, and even worse, the pain and the damage that it could bring on a person's life perpetually for so many years to come, because that sometimes never gets erased. Now let's go to this putting a stumbling block in front of a blind person. Again, the sages explain this is not literal. This cannot mean literal because I told you the questions. It doesn't make sense. Rather, what this means, when someone is quote unquote blind in something, someone is perhaps sometimes blinded, maybe by ignorance. They don't know that something is really wrong. They don't realize sometimes the enormity, the severity of a certain prohibition. Or perhaps maybe they're just even blinded by their own narcissism, by their own self-indulgence, and therefore they cannot hold themselves back from doing something wrong. You should not become a catalyst for their wrongdoing. And this not only applies to quote-unquote commandments, but think about it this way. Just imagine you have a friend or a family, a relative that is, let's say, diabetic, and they are not allowed to eat, say, cakes with sugar, with high carb content, but there's a birthday. And they say, please, come on, let me have a piece of birthday cake. You feel like, I mean, what's the great harm? I'm going to be kind. Look how much they want it. Look how much it means to them. But this person is obviously blind, because right now in this moment, they don't see the harm that they're doing to themselves and potentially to their lives, to their mere survival as a result of this little sweet indulgence that they have in the moment. So when you do offer it to them, you are now tripping. You are now making stumble the quote unquote blind. Or if somebody, like I said before, is ignorant about something being wrong, you cannot provide them the means of the transgression, because then the onus is on you. And again, going back to our society, today's day and age, how many people have certain weaknesses and certain shortcomings. And instead of encouraging them to work on it, instead of encouraging them to become stronger and overcome the temptations, society seems to buckle in, cave in, and say, okay, not only are we going to say it's okay, but maybe we're going to turn it into a virtue. We're going to celebrate it. We're going to be proud of it. This is something the Torah tells us, no, you cannot do. Now we'll go to the end of the verse, and you should fear your God. And sages tell us that only in several unique places, and you see it a lot in this chapter, does God make this statement, and you should have fear from your God. I am your God. Because God says these are the type of things where one can put on an innocent poker face and say, oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize. And perhaps the people around you will never suspect you of having committed any of these sins spelled out in this verse. Perhaps they will believe you and take you at your word that you really innocently didn't realize that you are tripping someone up in their weakness, or that you're serving someone something that's not good for them, or that you're cursing somebody that's quote unquote deaf. God says, you should fear me. I am your God. I know what's in your heart. I know what your intentions are, regardless of what face you put on. So make sure not to do these. And this also tells us how important, how fundamental, how severe these things are, because they hit people in society at the core of their being.